capital flows.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll pick up on where Saleem left off on the framing of the problem, because understandably, in light of the magnitude of the crisis we're facing, people are inclined to think about the framing of this as a problem. But let's try to look at it again for a moment as an opportunity. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. We are at the beginning of what will be the largest economic engine since the Industrial Revolution. Over the course of the next 40 years, mankind will find a way to drive the carbon productivity of our economies up by a factor of 10. And that will create massive number of jobs, enormous amounts of economic growth, new products, innovations, new capital flows, and mechanisms to bring also countries from the developing part of the world into the global community. So if you look at the challenges that have been posed in this discussion from that opportunity frame, suddenly some things look slightly different. Because accountability not only is a question suddenly about governments, but accountability also becomes a matter of business. And business can be held accountable to drive economic growth in a low carbon direction. And issues about reallocation of resources and difficult decisions that governments have to make are much easier in a market mechanism. And the lady from Global Witness asked us, well, how are we going to ever marshal $450 billion that the IEA has identified as being needed for our new energy infrastructure? There is very little chance that governments will find mechanisms to do that. There is a much better likelihood that the capital markets will mobilize those size of funds. Along the same way, if we set the right policy environment, it will create a leverage mechanism for business to come in and to do what they're good at, create new products, create innovation, and distribute that innovation across the globe. When I think it was Apple came out with a new iPhone earlier this week, and it took only a week before that product was available in stores all around the world. If governments have to roll out new innovations around the world, they struggle. They find it difficult to think across borders. But global business is very good at this. So why not think about this challenge also from the framework of opportunity and leverage business into a new type of economy? And that brings me back to my plans, my low carbon growth plans, because businesses know how to deal with a plan. They do it every 3 years. Every year they create the annual plan and the budget. So if we create these low carbon growth plans for developed countries and for developing countries, we give them a stake in what needs to happen. We point the way. We show them where their investment is going to be relevant. We tell them where to mobilize their capital. They'll take ownership of this transition. And it will enormously reduce the burden on governments to do what is needed to do. So once again, I argue strenuously for countries putting their shoulders under creating a plan that all of the country, civil society, business, and policy leaders can sign up to and say, okay, that's our pathway to low carbon prosperity. That's the capital we'll need. We'll have to have inflows for the developing world from the developed world. But we also have a lot of resources in our own country, and we'll put them to work in order to drive to a low carbon economy.
Thank you very much. Next question or observation? It should just work.
Yes, Monica Pagador is civil society from Peru. Well, adaptation, mitigation, words that not everybody knows or understand. I think Copenhagen should be a good opportunity to involve civil society on this process to create awareness. I definitely agree with Eddie in the importance of education and create awareness through media or through information, but clear and easy information in all languages. And climate change is a question of life or death. I think it's a question of human rights. As 1948 was the year of the Universal Human Rights Declaration, I think 2009 should be the year of the human universal declaration against climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And perhaps we can pass the microphone across to this side. I think you had your hand in the air first, I think, sir, and then we'll give it to you.
Okay, my name's Sarah Walpole. I'm here following some work I did at the WHO. I've got two questions. First of all, how much potential is there to use the kind of savings that are possible from climate change? So I don't just mean in terms of, for example, the airport tax that you were talking about, so that provides funds and that can be plugged in, but also in terms of many of the solutions to climate change actually being money savers, so home insulation, active transport, things like that are potentials to create funds. And I know of the example of, for example, Germany, where those who produce energy at the local level can put it back into the grid, and therefore that kind of mode has proliferated a lot more than in the UK, where that's not possible to get the money back from the grid. How much potential is there to sort of use those kind of principles on the international level, and rather than looking at new ways of creating more money using the savings? And my second question is, how much difference would it make, or how much potential is there to further measure where the emissions come from? So, for example, at the moment, clothes that we buy, where the emissions come from another country where the clothing's produced. How much difference would that make if we were able to better allocate the emissions to those who are using the goods or the services or whatever it may be?
Okay, did you have a question as well?
Well, a comment. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this rich debate. I am Luis Valles from the Mission of Ecuador here in Geneva to the UN, and I cover environmental issues. My comment was about what it has been referred here in the panel and from some people from the floor about the importance to mobilize resources from developed to developing countries and how difficult it is. And very briefly, I want to give you the example of my country. In Ecuador, we have a beautiful national park called Yasuní. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, we have found oil, a huge reserve of oil under this national park. And of course, we don't want to exploit that oil. But we are asking, with a very well-structured plan done by national and international experts, with all the mechanisms of a very well-established system, audit and guarantees are there, very transparent, to mobilize resources. We have asked the international community, in exchange of not exploiting that oil, to receive some compensation to develop green technology for green energy in the Amazon jungle. This national park is in the Amazon jungle, one of the richest, as well it has been mentioned here, one of the richest biodiversity areas in the world. But still, we have received some response, wonderful response, mainly from countries in Europe, but it's not what we expected. We wanted to create a fund that will produce 300 millions per year. It's not thousands of millions. We are talking about 300 millions per year. But even though it's not like it has been mentioned here, it's not a huge, enormous quantity of money. Of course, it's an important quantity of money. It's difficult. So even though, as I said, we have a very well-structured plan, we have a very well-structured mechanism for mobilizing these resources, it's difficult. What else do we need to do? Thank you.
So the response so far has been warm words, but no contribution to the fund.
Yes, there are funds already.
But there are some funds.
There are funds already, but they're still not enough for what we are expecting. We are not expecting to get the same amount of money that we will get for exploiting that oil. We are a developing country, we need that money, but still we don't want to exploit the oil. But still we would like to get some compensation for that. We are talking about half or even less of what it will be produced from that oil to the country. Thank you.
Okay.